She filled in for her poorly sister at the cafe. The man at table 3 wasn't just any customer. He was the CEO. "Come on, sis." "I'm only covering your shift for 2 hours. Please, please don't let anything go pear-shaped today," Mia whispered into her mobile, stepping into the narrow back room of the So cafe as she adjusted the green apron around her waist. Her blonde hair, hastily tied in a low ponytail, clung slightly to the side of her cheek from the morning humidity. Her sister coughed on the other end, raspy and breathless. "I owe you one, big time," the voice wheezed. "Seriously, I'll make it. Up to you. Just take the orders and smile. The morning crowd is usually quiet, all right?" "You'll be fine," Mia sighed and shoved the phone into her pocket. She was not a barista. She had never operated a till, steamed milk, or remembered the difference between a flat white and a cappuccino. But her sister was ill, properly ill, and their mum had just been readmitted to the hospital last night. So Mia did what she always did. She showed up. 10 minutes in, she had only fumbled 2 drinks, miscounted, changed once, and burned her fingers, trying to grab a croissant from the oven. Not a complete disaster, she figured, until she got to table 3. The order had been a simple black coffee. No sugar, no milk, no nonsense. The man sitting there had not looked up once since she brought it to him. He was in his late 30s, perhaps early 40s, with dark hair and a sharp jawline. His sleeves were rolled up just enough to reveal a dark, expensive-looking watch on his wrist. Headphones hung loosely around his neck, not in his ears. He was typing intently on a sleek, silver laptop. Mia tried to be careful. She really did. But as she cleared an empty plate, her elbow nudged the corner of her tray. And in one horrifying slow motion instant, the full cup of coffee tipped over. The dark liquid spilled like ink across the keyboard, and the screen blinked twice before dying completely. "No, no, no, no." Mia gasped, lunging forward with a fistful of napkins, her hands trembling. "I am so sorry." "Oh, goodness. Let me. I'll pay for the repairs." "I will. Whatever it costs, The man paused his frantic wiping. Then he calmly closed the lid, took a folded cloth from his coat pocket, and began methodically wiping the keyboard. "It's just coffee," he said, his voice quiet, low. "I've spilt worse." He did not raise his voice. He did not flinch. He did not even meet her eyes. Mia froze, holding a wad of soggy napkins like a child caught in a storm. "I really am so sorry," she said again, softer this time. "Please, let me cover the cost." He shook his head once. "No need." He stood, slipped the laptop into a waterproof case, and without so much as touching the spilt coffee, without another word, he walked straight out of the door. Mia stood there, still clutching the napkins, her hands sticky with caffeine and shame. The cafe had gone quiet. The regulars were too polite to stare, but she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, a hot flush of embarrassment that soaked deeper than the coffee had. She cleaned the table in silence, each swipe of the cloth feeling heavier than the last. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't rolled his eyes. He hadn't even sighed. Somehow, that made it all the more awful. Mia was used to harshness. She could brace herself against anger, prepare a defense. But this quiet kindness, delivered with such profound indifference, was absolute, and it cut sharper than any insult. It was not just coffee she had spilt. It was something else. Something that left her standing by table 3, staring at the door, long after he had disappeared, through it wondering why, of all the things that could have gone wrong today, it had to be this. Mia returned to the cafe the next morning, her shoulders tight and her eyes rimmed with fatigue. Her sister's fever had spiked overnight, and the doctors had decided to keep her in the hospital for observation. That meant Mia was back behind the counter again, unplanned, unprepared, and emotionally stretched thin. She buttoned her apron with a sigh and tucked a small bakery box under the till. It was early. A soft drizzle misted the windows in gentle streaks. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, warm and familiar. And just before the clock struck 8:30, she saw him. Juan. He walked through the door. Her breath hitched in her throat. Same coat, same laptop bag, same expressionless face. He took his seat at table 3 without a single glance in her direction. No order, no conversation. He just sat down, opened his laptop, and began typing in. Silence. Mia hesitated for only a moment, then grabbed the bakery box and walked towards him, her heart beating far too fast for such a small gesture. She placed it gently on the table, just beside his laptop. Inside was a lemon tart, her sister's favorite, bought from a corner bakery, with the last of the cash from her coat pocket. Tucked under the lid was a small, handwritten card. Sorry for the mess. Perhaps something sweet can fix the bitter. Juan didn't look up, but he slid the box an inch closer to his laptop. Mia walked away without saying a word. From that day forward, he came in, daily. Always at the same time, always at table 3, always quiet. He never ordered a thing. He wore headphones loosely around his neck, but Mia noticed he never actually used them. There was no blinking light, no cords connected, no music playing. It was as if they were a shield he never turned on. And every morning, Mia left something for him. Sometimes it was a chocolate biscuit. Other days, a slice of banana loaf she had baked late at night after visiting the hospital. The note inside changed with her moods. Hope today is kinder to you. We all spill things sometimes. The best things in life leave a stain. Juan never responded with words, but each time, before he took the first bite, he would pause, inhale the scent of the treat, and close his eyes for just a second. It was as if the aroma held something sacred, as if he needed to remember it. It was that single moment, those 2 seconds of quiet reverence, that made Mia keep baking. One afternoon, as she passed his table with a tray of drinks for Todd, another customer, she paused, briefly behind him. He didn't see her, but she saw what he did. He took one of her notes, the pink, the one with "You're more than your silence," written in looping, cursive, and gently folded it in half, then in quarters, and then again. Finally, he opened his wallet and slipped the tiny, folded piece of paper inside. Mia's lips parted slightly. She felt the corners of her mouth lift, not in amusement, but with something closer to relief. Or perhaps wonder. Someone was listening and someone cared. That evening, she stayed an extra 30 minutes just to make sure the counters were spotless. She caught herself humming while she swept near table 3. Her shoes no longer dragged quite so much. Her sighs came slower. And then it happened. The next morning, Mia walked out of the back room and found table 3, exactly as she expected. Juan, seated, laptop open. But this time, something was different. A folded envelope lay beneath the tip jar. Inside was a 5-bar note and a small card. Today was kinder. Thank you. Mia stood motionless, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. It was the first time he had responded, the first time he had acknowledged the notes, the pastries, the quiet presence she offered. Her fingers grazed the edge of the envelope, her eyes warming. She folded the note again, just as he had done with hers, and placed it carefully inside her apron pocket. When she looked up, Juan was already watching her. He gave a single, subtle nod. Mia smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. And in that moment, her heart softened in a way it hadn't in a very long time. The conversations began the way most important things do, quietly, almost accidentally. One morning, after placing a warm pumpkin muffin on Juan's table with the usual note, Mia lingered a little longer than she normally would. She watched as he read her message, the faintest trace of a smile forming at the corners of his mouth. She cleared her throat. That one has nutmeg in it, she said, nodding towards the muffin. I think I overdid it a bit last time. Hope this batch is gentler. Juan looked up. I rather liked the last one, he replied. It was the first full sentence he had spoken to her since the coffee spill. Mia blinked, then let out a soft laugh. Well, if you like nutmeg, I've got great news about tomorrow's scones. He chuckled, a low sound under his breath. I'll be here. After that, their words came more freely. They were still sparse, but they were meaningful. They talked about simple things. What kind of tea smelled better than it tasted? How the sun never hit table 3 directly. The pros and cons of crunchy versus soft biscuits. And then, gradually, deeper truths slipped into the silences. Mia told him about her mother. She was diagnosed last spring. I dropped out of my psychology degree 2 weeks later. I kept telling myself I'd go back eventually, but her voice trailed off as she stared at the frothing milk behind the counter. Juan didn't interrupt. He just nodded, his eyes steady, letting the weight of her words settle without judgment. I still read psychology books sometimes, she added. Not the textbooks, the people ones. The ones that remind you why we're all just a little bit messy, and that's okay. He finally spoke. That's probably the best kind. Mia smiled. What about you? What do you do besides haunt this table? I'm between things, he said simply. She tilted her head. Sounds mysterious. Juan shrugged. Sometimes mystery is just exhaustion in a nice coat. It made her laugh, but she sensed something Behind his words, something unfinished and private. She didn't push. He never talked much, but he watched, and Mia, without trying, gave him plenty to notice. She greeted every customer with a sincerity that could not be faked. She knelt down to talk to toddlers at eye level and remembered the names of the elderly patrons' dogs. When an angry man once shouted at her for getting his order wrong, she apologized with such calm grace that he later returned to tip her double and say sorry. Juan saw all of it. He saw how she gently coached a nervous teenager through his first job interview practice. He saw how she tucked a pound coin into the tip jar of the tired delivery driver when no one was looking. And he saw how, every evening after closing, she sat on the cafe's back steps for exactly 5 minutes, staring at the sky as if giving herself permission to finally rest. That kind of goodness wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It just was. One Tuesday afternoon, near the end of her shift, a little girl came into the cafe with her mother. While the woman ordered at the counter, the girl wandered around with some crayons and a piece of scrap paper. Mia noticed, crouched beside her, and asked if she liked to draw. The girl nodded enthusiastically and got to work. 15 minutes later, she returned, with a beaming smile and a sheet filled with crooked stars, oversized eyes, and wild yellow hair. "Here," she chirped. "It's you." Mia laughed, genuinely touched. "That's beautiful." "Thank you so much." The girl pointed at the caption she had scribbled in shaky letters at the bottom. "The nice blonde lady who smiles." She ran back to her mum, giggling, leaving Mia holding the paper like it was something sacred. Juan had watched the entire exchange from table 3. When Mia glanced at him, her cheeks flushed with surprise. She found him already watching her. His expression was soft, unguarded. He smiled. Not a half smile, not the faint twitch of politeness, but a real, full smile that lingered in his eyes. Something shifted between them in that moment. It wasn't dramatic, no fireworks or violins, but something old inside. Juan, something silent and tired, had stirred. And in that quiet corner of the cafe, a new kind of warmth had begun to grow. The rain came hard that afternoon, sudden and loud against the windows, drumming like a quiet storm inside Mia's chest. She wiped her hands on a towel behind the counter, watching the water collect along the edge of the pavement. Table 3 was empty. Juan hadn't come in. It unsettled her more than she expected. She told herself he was just a customer, a quiet, kind man who liked muffins and folded paper, notes into his wallet. Nothing more. Nothing she should be waiting for. Then the bell above the door jingled. Juan walked in, damp from the shoulders down, a dark umbrella folded under one arm. His hair was tousled, his coat dripping, but he looked calm. The moment their eyes met, Mia felt her chest lighten just a little. But before she could greet him, a commotion near the curb drew her attention. An elderly woman was struggling to lift a small trolley filled with groceries into a waiting taxi. The driver stayed inside, unmoved. People passed by under their umbrellas, barely glancing at her. Mia didn't hesitate. She dropped her towel and ran. Outside, arms bare, her shoes instantly soaked. Her apron clung to her back as she knelt beside the woman. "Let me help you," she said, lifting bags, one by one, ignoring the water seeping into her sleeves. The trolley was heavier than it looked, and the taxi's boot refused to stay open. Her hair stuck to her face, and her breath came harder as the rain picked up. Then, suddenly, there was a coat over her shoulders. Not hers. It was warm, dry, and smelled faintly of cedar and something clean. She looked up. Juan stood beside her. Rain, Juan, plastered his shirt to his chest. His sleeves rolled past his elbows, his face unreadable, but present. He said nothing. He didn't take over. He didn't rush her. He simply stood there, holding the boot open with one hand, offering the quiet support of someone who knew how not to interrupt. Together, they finished packing the last bag. The old woman thanked them softly, her eyes wide with gratitude, then climbed into the taxi and disappeared into the rain. Mia straightened up slowly, pulling Juan's coat tighter around her. She turned to him, soaked through, her heart knocking awkwardly in her chest. "You didn't have to come out." "Here," she said, brushing hair from her face. "You could have stayed dry." He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke, his voice low and gentle. "Some moments don't need words." She blinked. Then, in the hush between raindrops, he added, "Sometimes presence matters more than anything you could possibly say." That stopped her cold. Mia, who had spent her life trying to say the right thing to make people feel heard, suddenly understood something deeper. Sometimes the most healing moments came in silence. They stood there, the rain softening around them, neither reaching for an umbrella nor running for shelter. Just two people wet to the bone, not quite touching, but closer than they had ever been. Juan finally broke the stillness. He reached out, not for her hand, but to adjust the collar of his coat around her shoulders, protecting her from the chill. Mia smiled, her lips trembling just slightly. "You'll catch a cold," she whispered. He shrugged. Worth it. They didn't go back inside right away. The cafe windows steamed with the heat of the people inside. But out here, in the open air and the falling rain, they found something warmer. Neither said what was in their hearts, but they both knew something had shifted again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but definitively. And as they stood there, drenched and quiet, a kind of truth settled over them. Not every love story begins with grand declarations. Sometimes it begins in silence, in rain, in a coat offered without question, and in the way someone stays, just long enough to remind you that you are never as alone as you think. The cafe was busier than usual that morning, buzzing with staff from different branches, name tags flashing, clipboards in hand. Mia had been asked to help cater for a private internal event, a leadership summit for the chain's upper management. She was told there would be speeches, strategy sessions, and probably a buffet table or two. She agreed without thinking much of it. After all, it was just one more shift. One more place to be. Helpful. Still, as she arranged the pastries on the catering table and adjusted the coffee urns, her eyes wandered to table 3. It was empty. For the first time in weeks, her chest pinched unexpectedly. She shook it off and focused on the task at hand. The event was held in the large hall upstairs, transformed into a sleek presentation space. Staff in smart suits filled the chairs, chatting quietly, sipping espresso from branded paper cups. Mia stood near the side wall with a tray of canapes, half listening as the MC welcomed the team and introduced the keynote speaker. Please welcome our new CEO, Mr. Juan Reyes. Mia turned instinctively towards the stage, then froze completely. Juan walked confidently to the podium, dressed sharply in a charcoal suit, a slight smile on his lips. He looked calm, assured, familiar, and not. Her breath caught in her throat. It was him, the man from table 3. Her heart pounded, the tray in her hands suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. Her mind reeled through the past few weeks. The silence, the folded notes, the coat in the rain, the muffins, conversations about tea and cinnamon, the quiet, careful trust that had grown between them. He had never once mentioned this. CEO. Not between things, not transitioning, not consulting. CEO. Mia stepped back, her face flushing with confusion, betrayal, and something more raw. Hurt. Had she just been another part of some test, an employee to observe? A novelty to entertain him while he judged her from behind a coffee cup? She did not stay to hear his speech. She slipped out of the side door and down the stairs, her apron unfastened, her hands trembling. Back in the empty kitchen, she gripped the edge of the counter and took slow, deep breaths. She hated crying at work. Later that day, after the event had finished, Juan came looking for her. She saw him through the narrow office window. He scanned the room slowly, his eyes landing on her for the briefest moment, but she turned away before he could step closer. She left early. He did not follow. The next morning, table 3 was empty again. And the next. And the next. A week passed in heavy silence. Then, on a rainy Thursday, Mia found a letter on the counter, slipped under a box of tea bags. Her name was written in bold, neat handwriting on the envelope. No stamp, no return address. She opened it slowly. Inside was a short note written in the same hand as every folded napkin from his past deliveries. But this one was different. Mia, I owe you more than an explanation, but I will start here. I never came for the coffee. I never stayed for the pastries. I stayed because for the first time in a long time someone saw me. Not for my title or my power or my failures, but for who I was in the silence. You made space for that without asking for anything in return. You were the first person who made me want to stop running, to sit still, to simply show up. I did not tell you who I was, because I liked being just the man. At table 3, I didn't mean to hide. I just wanted to be someone else, with you. Someone honest. I hope that is still worth something. Juan. Mia stood by the back door, the note trembling in her hands. Her eyes burned, and this time she did not fight it. She folded the paper once, then again, pressing it to her chest, like a pulse. Her thoughts swirled with pain, confusion, and something far more complicated. Hope? He had lied by omission, but he had also sat with her through storms, folded her notes like they were treasures, and remembered every message, every pastry, every single moment. She was not ready to forgive him. Not yet. But for the first time in days, she felt her heart soften just enough to remember that not all secrets are meant to deceive. Some are meant to protect something, too tender to name. And maybe, just maybe, that meant there was still a page left to turn. Mia hadn't planned to talk about it, not with anyone. But 3 days after the conference, she found herself curled up on her best friend's sofa, hands wrapped around a pickle-chipped mug of peppermint tea that had long gone cold. Eliza, her friend since college, listened quietly until Mia finished the story with a hollow, "He's the CEO." There was a beat of silence. Then Eliza scoffed. "Of course he is." That's classic. Oh, come on, Mia. These types, they play at being humble, hang around like they're just observing. Meanwhile, they're sizing you up. And when it's all over, boom, surprise, CEO. Like it's some kind of romantic twist in a film. Mia flinched. It wasn't like that, was it? Eliza leaned forward, her expression serious. You don't think you were just some feel-good story he can use later? Look at this kind. Barista who changed my perspective. It's PR gold. Mia shook her head slowly. He didn't seem like that. They never do. The words hit harder than they should have. Maybe because Eliza had been burned before by a wealthy fiancé who had sold her dreams and delivered only betrayal. Or maybe because, deep down, Mia was already doubting everything. She went home that night and sat in the dark for a long time, replaying moments that had once felt beautiful and now seemed tainted by his silence. The next morning, she resigned from the cafe. No explanation, no goodbye to Juan. Just a short email and a heavy heart. She didn't hear from him, and that hurt too. Days passed, then a week. Mia kept her head down, took care of her mother, went on long walks with no destination, and read old psychology books, though she barely absorbed the words. One gray Saturday, she stepped outside to check the mail and stopped in her tracks. There, propped gently against her porch railing, was her mother's old bicycle, but it was restored. The rusted frame now gleamed a soft teal. The dented basket had been replaced with a new one woven from thick cotton. The tires were full. The seat was new leather. It looked exactly the way her mother used to describe it from her youth. That bike made me feel like I could fly. Mia blinked back, tears. On the seat was a package wrapped in brown craft paper and tied with a navy ribbon. No card. Inside was a worn psychology notebook. Her own, from her first year of her degree. She hadn't seen it in ages. When she opened it, a single page was marked. Page 47. Highlighted in yellow was a sentence she remembered underlining during a late-night study session. Listening is not about crafting a reply. It is about understanding what someone cannot say aloud. Tucked beside the page was a small, white envelope. She opened it with shaking hands. It was a workshop ticket for a free, community-led event focused on everyday empathy in mental health. At the bottom was a handwritten note. Page 47. The lesson you once taught me, without even knowing. You made me listen, not to respond, but to understand. Juan. Mia pressed the book to her chest. The wind rustled the trees around her, soft and steady. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt, beneath the doubt, her heart exhaled. She was not sure what she would do next. But for the first time in days, she did not feel used or observed or manipulated. She felt seen, truly seen. And that meant everything. Mia arrived early but slipped in, late, choosing a seat in the back row where the shadows pooled, beneath the tall auditorium lights. The workshop hall was warm and buzzing softly with quiet conversations, the kind of energy that came from people genuinely wanting to learn something that might change them. She clutched the ticket in her hand, the one he had left tucked inside her old psychology notebook. She had told herself this was just curiosity, that she did not owe him anything. But her heart had not stopped beating a little faster since the moment she stepped through the doors. No one knew she was there. No one called her name or looked her way. She was safe in her corner of anonymity, until the host stepped up to the microphone. Mia's breath caught. It was Juan. No suit this time, just a simple shirt, sleeves rolled, his dark hair slightly tousled. He looked less like a CEO and more like the man who used to fold her notes as if they meant something. He smiled briefly, scanning the audience. I was supposed to open this workshop by sharing something about empathy, he began, his voice steady. But the truth is, I am not here as a teacher today. I'm here as a student of someone who probably doesn't even realize she changed how I see the world. He paused, his hands resting lightly on the podium. Some months ago, I met a woman who spilled coffee on my laptop. It sounds like a small moment, but it was the first time in years someone truly looked me in the eye and didn't see my job, my title, or my past mistakes. Mia sat perfectly still, her hands clenched in her lap. She apologized with a pastry, he continued, a soft laugh, under his words. And over time, with tiny acts of kindness, she taught me how to be still, how to show up, how to listen, not to fix, not to respond, but to understand. He scanned the room again, slower this time. She reminded me that empathy is not grand. It is quiet, consistent, and gentle. A long pause, and she's here today. Mia's breath faltered. She's probably sitting in the back because she never looks for the spotlight. But I want you all to know that the best teacher I've had in a long time was never in charge of this stage. She was behind a counter in the rain, folding notes and offering muffins to a man who had forgotten how to be still. The audience began to applaud, a warm and soft sound. Juan stepped back from the microphone. He did not try to find her in the crowd. He just smiled once more and left the stage. After the workshop, people mingled, exchanging notes and emails, but Mia stayed in her seat. She needed a moment. Then he appeared, quiet as ever, standing at the end of her row. She looked up slowly. Juan didn't ask how she was. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't say anything rehearsed. He just met her gaze and said, gently, "If you still remember me, if you have room for someone who's still learning, would you meet me back at table 3? Mia stared at him, her lips parting just slightly. And then, after a long, breathless silence, she smiled. It was a quiet Thursday morning when Mia walked back into the cafe. Nothing had changed. The gentle hum of the espresso machine, the low chatter of early customers, the same soft jazz playing from the corner speaker. But everything felt different. Her heart thudded softly as she glanced towards table 3. He was there. Juan sat exactly where he always had, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes on the window as if he were waiting for something. No, someone. And in front of him sat 2 cups of coffee, steaming gently. Between them was a small, familiar, white box tied with twine. As Mia approached, she saw the note, taped on top in his unmistakable handwriting, "Sweet things still fix bitter days." Her lips curved into a quiet smile. He stood as she reached the table, not making a show of it, but just enough to honor the moment. "Wasn't sure if you'd come," he said, his voice soft. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "I wasn't sure either." They shared a moment of silence, soft and full. Not awkward, but honest. Juan slid a folder across the table. "What's this?" she asked, her eyebrows raised. "A proposal," he said simply. She opened it. Inside was a job offer. Official letterhead. Neat formatting. A position newly created. Director of Customer Well-Being and Empathy Integration. Her name was already typed at the top. She looked up slowly. "Are you hiring me because I gave you muffins?" He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Because you reminded me that businesses are still about people, and people need more than just good coffee." She raised an eyebrow, a teasing light in her eyes. "Is this a real role or a guilt gift?" Juan leaned in, his eyes gentle but sincere. "It's a real role, a needed one, and you're the only person I trust to define what it means." She bit her lip, flipping through the pages. There were ideas sketched in the margins, notes about community, outreach, mental health days for baristas, customer care rooted in psychological understanding. It was thoughtful, visionary. "You wrote these?" she asked, surprised. "With your voice in my head," he replied. Page 47 kept talking. She laughed softly. Then, with a playful tilt of her head, she asked, "So, is this a job? Interview?" Juan shook his head, his smile widening. "No. This is an invitation to be the one person I never want to stop listening to." Her chest fluttered. She looked at the coffee in front of her, the pastry box, and the man who had gone from stranger to constant, from silence to presence. Mia reached into the box, pulled out the small lemon tart, and broke it in 2. She handed him 1/2, sweet. "Things fix bitter days," she said, echoing his note. He took the pastry, touched by the symmetry of it all. They sat there for a long time, sharing coffee, trading quiet, smiles, and long glances. There were no grand declarations, no fireworks, just two people choosing to stay, to listen, to begin again, right where it all started. As the cafe buzzed around them, time seemed to slow. The past had been messy, the future was uncertain. But in that moment at table 3, something whole and beautiful was being written. One sip, one word, one silent promise at a time. Thank you for watching this heart-warming journey of healing, presence, and love that began with a spilled cup of coffee and unfolded at table 3. If this story stirred something in your soul, reminded you of the power of quiet kindness, or simply made you believe in slow, gentle love again, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Here, we bring you real emotions, gentle lessons, and tales that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Join our community for more stories that don't just entertain, but truly touch the heart. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep believing in small beginnings.